wintry morning or magical midnight, wherever, whenever you may be, across the dimensions or around the vibrations. I'm Tillie Treadwell, and oh, have I got a show for you. Won't you join us on The Weird Walk Home? Hello, everyone. Welcome or welcome back. I'm Tillie Treadwell, and I have with me today my favorite bearded weirdo from the Esoteric Book Club. What's up, brother?
How's it going?
It's going very well and quite festive over here, as you can see. What about yourself? You're looking dapper.
Well, I'm wearing green. That's something, right?
I love it. I love it.
I'm
Yeah,
rocking the Santa beard, so that's a start.
you are. And how are you, good sir?
I'm good. It's been a good day.
Excellent.
In case
And
anyone's wondering, my name is Jason.
yes, his name is Jason, aka the Bearded Weirdo. But yes, so my friend, we have a lot to talk about. I know that you are incredibly passionate about books in such a beautiful way, I think. Can you please tell me about where that passion started for you and where it's going?
A lot of the passion for books in general started when I was a kid because
Mm,
I grew up in a poor family,
mm,
and books at the time, they were more cost effective compared to toys, and they kept me entertained for a lot longer of a time. So my parents really encouraged me reading, especially since my dad he wasn't a strong reader growing up. Um, in hindsight, that's because he needed glasses and they didn't realize that. But by
oh,
then the damage was already done, so he wasn't a strong reader. But my parents, my mom and my dad, really encouraged me to read, and I just kept that passion going. My topics haven't changed much. I still read about dinosaurs and Bigfoot, so we're good there. And I eventually ended up working in a bookstore,
mm.
and that was dangerous for me. Uh, I was the receiving manager, so I got to see every book that came through the loading bay, and I ended up with a huge library because of that.
Mhm.
But it allowed me to see a lot of these titles before they even made it to the shelf.
Interesting, interesting. And as far as the dinosaurs and Bigfoot go, I like that.
See, people ask me all the time, it's like, what got you started in this? And it's like, man, it was a coloring book when I was 3. I grew up in the 80s, so everything was either dinosaurs and then like cryptids were just getting really big. Everything was Loch Ness Monster, UFOs, and Bigfoot. So
Okay.
even the children's stuff, there were coloring books of all of these creatures.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I like that. So I I am a 90s kid and we didn't have nearly as much of that, to be honest. And I'm a little sad now hearing about a Bigfoot coloring book. I would have been all over that.
Yeah, in the 90s, all the attention shifted from actual cryptids over to Pokemon, so I
It
can't
did.
fault them for that, but yeah, you lose something in that too.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Pokemon cards and Pokemon coloring books, everything Pokemon, that was just where it was at for
Hmm.
my generation. But now that I've grown up in some ways, I still feel like a kid at heart, but I've grown up in a few ways now that I realize that there are actual mons out there. Oh my goodness, that's way better than the fictional Pokemon, in my opinion. But
Well, some of those fictional Pokemon are based on the real cryptids.
I have heard that, but I never knew if that was actually true or if that was just like an urban legend. Is it
No, it's
true?
true. It's limited, but it's true. The one that pops to mind real quick is Sableye is based on the Hopkinsville goblins.
I know that little one.
Yeah,
Yeah, doesn't he has the jewels for eyes.
that's right. But his
Oh my,
appearance with the big ears, the big head, and the
yeah.
skinny body, that is based off of the original Kelly Hopkinsville sketches.
I learn something new every day. Awesome. So, in going from fictional Pokemon to non-fictional monsters, this brings us to the subject of magic and some of these topics that you cover in your Esoteric Book Club. I know tonight you've brought to share with us some incredible book recommendations and tell us all about them. So, what you got on deck, Captain?
Well, I went back through my stack and I tried to figure out what books I would recommend. And that's what I
Mhm.
brought with me today. So, actually, I'm starting out with two books because up until October, there was only one book that I recommended basically to everybody, and that
Oh,
is right here, The Path of Paganism by John Beckett. Now, this one, even though it's called The Path of Paganism, it is a book about constructing a spiritual practice or a spiritual path for yourself. So it's very non-specific, which means I really recommend that for anybody, regardless of your faith, just because of how it's constructed, how it's laid out. It's
yeah.
honestly such an influential book that I try to read it once a year.
Oh,
Yeah, very few
my.
books will I read more than once. That one I've gone through three, maybe four times. I've actually gone through several copies because I give it away and I never get it back.
Oh. So that means it's a pretty good book, huh?
It's a
Yeah.
fantastic book.
I should probably read that then at some point because I've never found a book or any resource really outside of the material that I'm trying to make that is adaptable to every path, potentially every
Hmm.
religion, every idea. It just seems to me like that's such a difficult line to walk. And if this person did it, I want to see it.
Well, speaking of adaptability, that
Yeah.
leads to our second book right here, Ancestral
Ooh.
Whispers. This is a brand new one, just came out in October.
Mhm.
So recently I did a top five books that I recommend for my show.
Mhm.
Had this one been printed at the time, it would have been number one.
Really?
Ancestral Whispers is a book about ancestral veneration, which covers a broad span of topics. Most people think of like Dia de los Muertos, and
Mhm.
it's about honoring and remembering family members and revered community members who have passed away.
Okay.
That's part of it.
Mhm.
This book looks at practices worldwide, looks at the foundations of those practices, and then reconstructs them so that you can use the foundations and the themes behind worldwide religions to
Hmm.
construct your own practice of ancestral veneration. Here's where it
Okay.
gets weird. He actually deconstructs the idea of ancestors. So how far back would you consider an ancestor? Is it your
For,
immediate family?
yeah, it would be for me, anyone who was born before me. For me personally. That's how I understand it.
Okay. Do you have a beloved family friend who may have passed along? Someone who was influential on you growing up?
None of that, no, to be honest, because in my family, so my family was super, super old school German and Irish. So kids were seen and not heard.
Hmm.
And I didn't have any close relationships with anyone. They had me older in life, and then they had those mentalities and stuff. So yeah.
Fair enough. But the idea, that's actually one of the expansions he goes into in this book. Oh, I should mention too that it's Ben Stimson is the author. There we go.
Oh, there, yeah, yeah.
This just came out in October of 2023. Easily one of the best books I've read. It's a he's a fantastic writer. But back to the idea of ancestors. So it's not just your immediate family, it's not your extended family, because there's community members who have influenced you in the way you were raised. And a
Hmm.
lot of people think of that and they're like, "Oh, well, I didn't have any family friends." You had teachers.
True. Very true.
Teachers are ancestors because especially now, they see you more than your parents do.
Mm.
So teachers are your ancestors. What about let's say podcasters? It's kind of a new thing, but for example, Where Did the Road Go? I've
Yeah.
listened to that show since 20, oh good Lord, 2015.
Wow.
That's pretty influential on me. So if Soraya, I'm sorry, I hope nothing happens to you, but long term, when you pass on, I would actually consider him an ancestor because of the influence he's had on me and my thought patterns, my
Mhm.
outlook of the world, really.
I could see that. You know, I think also that Soraya would make a hella cool spirit animal too.
Yeah. If there's anybody who would want to haunt you, it would be him.
Yes, it would be him. It would absolutely be him. I'd be down for that.
Now, are you ready to get even stranger?
Absolutely, sir.
Have you heard of a dryad?
I have. I really need to brush up on my vocabulary though. So could you please re-enlighten me?
That's quite all right. Dryad is a specific species of a broad category of creatures known as, are they naiads? No, naiads are water. Well, I just brought up a topic that I forgot the word for. So they're
Ouch.
tree spirits. They're tree
Okay.
spirits and plant spirits. Dryad specifically inhabits oak trees. They're a spirit, and if you have a close connection to a specific tree, and that tree is no longer around, they could potentially be an ancestor that you venerate as well. So it's not just the people who influence you, it's your environment. It could even be
Okay.
your pets.
Okay. So I think I'm understanding what you're getting at as far as what this author is saying. And two, I think it's so interesting that you brought up oak trees and spirits because in going back through my memories of when I was a professional paranormal investigator, I had worked a case where there was a landowner who took me and my team into a grove of oak trees and pine trees, etc. And he said, over here the one day, I witnessed a like 7 to 8 foot tall, muscular Bigfoot walk into this oak tree and be absorbed into it.
Man, that's amazing. I
Isn't
would
it?
love that.
Right? So it was one of the freaking coolest stories that I have ever heard of in my life. And I wonder then, could Bigfoot be considered one of our ancestors in that way?
Absolutely. Actually, several native tribes, I don't know that they consider him an ancestor, but more of a distant relation where he's not part of the tribe. The entity is its own tribe, its own species almost, that lives parallel to humanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me as well. What you're saying, I agree. I do think that there is a little bit of bleed over, though. I really do think that human people, non-human people, I really think that we're all just one big family with lots of
Mhm.
different branches and different dimensions and different vibrations and different typical life stories, incarnate storylines, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us into the next theme of ancestors.
Oh,
There are, for lack of a better term, cultural memes or fictional characters. Now, bear with me. This sounds very strange when you think about it until you look back at, like, say, Roman or Greek times.
okay.
There were emperors who said that they were descendants of Venus or Ares or
Yeah.
Hercules was one of their ancestors.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they may or may not have been real. They may or may not, some of these characters may not have even been demigods. So claiming them as part of your bloodline, think of someone who, now I'm not saying anyone would claim Superman as their direct ancestor, but he's been around so long that he has influenced generations of people.
Right.
And there are people today whose moral compass is based on Superman and his comics and his movies and TV series. So even though he's not a real character, he's kind of real in a metaphysical sense because of what he is and what he means and what he teaches people.
True. Well, I think oh, so this pulls a lot of different strings.
Oh, yeah.
you've heard of the Mandela effect, right?
Hmm.
Okay, and of being so-called retconned.
Right?
Okay. So I personally believe that I have experienced timeline switches and dimensional shifts, switches.
Okay.
So, for example, I used to, when I was very small, live in a reality where the green light was on top of the red light on the stoplight.
Okay.
And one day when I was a toddler, it switched to the red being on top. And it's just been that way ever since. And lots of other people have reported the same types of experiences. And so thinking about it now, excuse me, I live in a world, in a universe where the red is on top instead. And so I wonder, what if there are really universes out there where people like Superman, or maybe even that Superman is real? What if we're not all tulpas anyway?
Have you heard of the podcast Creative Weirdos?
Ah, no, no.
It's run by a guy named Todd Purse, and I was just listening to an episode today, and they were talking about comic books and how the guest, I'm sorry, I forget the guy's name. Oh, Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, that's who he was talking to.
Okay.
He said that the way he conceptualizes this, comic books are stories. Okay? We get
Hmm.
that far.
Yeah.
But so are we.
That's exactly what my whole episode Imaginary was about.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So, and then they got in this big philosophical discussion is about like, do comic book characters know that they're comic book characters? That they're
Hmm.
in a story being read by a three-dimensional character, which would be us, reading
Uh-huh.
a two-dimensional version of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that a lot, and I agree with those lines of questioning. For my episode Imaginary, the thumbnail is actually an altered version of a My Little Pony character making a funny face, and the text says something like, "When you find out that you're a fictional character," or something like
Oh,
that.
nice.
Yeah, and I go literally all the way down that line of thinking to the conclusion that life has no meaning except for what we decide, if we decide to give it meaning. And here is how to combat the the Nietzschean depression that can come with these realizations, because it can be really heavy, you know?
Oh, for
And then
sure.
I talked about Sophie's World, the book. Have you heard of that?
No, I don't know that one.
Okay, so this was written in 1991, I believe, by oh my goodness, a Nordic or a Finnish author. I can't remember which, but this guy crafted one heck of a story. It revolves around a 14-year-old girl who starts getting these weird messages from this old guy and his dog, which is already really creepy and weird, right?
Hmm.
It just completely goes off the rails from here and winds up with her running away from him because, yeah, running away with him because he convinces her that they're just fictional characters in a book, but then he proves it to her because they break out of the book that was being written. They're written into this book as a gift for the author's uh, teenage daughter, and then they discover that the author is also just a character in someone else's book.
Wow.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna have to find that book. That sounds great.
It is. But I warn you, it's an acid trip on paper.
I believe it.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm old enough too that I got to see The Matrix in theaters. So, yeah, seeing that for the first time, like opening day, not knowing what was going on, you get to the end of that movie, and I was in high school when I saw this too. So I got to the end of that movie, and it's like, is any of this real? Are we real? Like, it's
Oh
a
yeah,
mind-blowing experience right there.
yeah. For real. Um, So I talk openly about my own neurodivergence. I've been diagnosed as being similar to autistic, but with distinct differences. And one of those differences is that I have very low ego content. And so I really admire um, other people's journeys in that everyone else seems to be caught up in their own life stories.
Mm.
But for me, I just sit here thinking about the choices that I can make in a formulaic sense to get where I want to go, if I even want to go anywhere, do or accomplish anything. And so I find it very charming to watch other people all caught up in the dilemmas and whatnot of their lives. And so sometimes I wish that I were more neurotypical in that way, because it would be like being lost in a really awesome book. You know what I mean?
Oh man, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
I wish I were the same way. Oh wow, yeah. Being able to be lost in your own story.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing.
Right? Right. So I don't know. I think what I'm trying to get at is that I really do think that we're all just characters at the end of the day, and that just a part of our soul essence comes here to play the role for a while.
Hmm.
And I think that some of us bring more freedom to the table. So in some ways, uh, man, you know what? I can't get into all this because it's like 4 hours. Sorry.
Well,
Anyway,
let's use this as a time to wrap up the previous book, Ancestral
yeah,
Whispers. The way I described this at the end of the show for that one, ancestral veneration is the story that we tell about ourselves.
yeah,
That's
okay,
it.
okay.
It's the story we tell it about ourselves and our extended family groups, even into like an animistic level where like the tree outside has an influence on me.
I
But
like
yeah,
that.
it's just stories.
Yeah, I'm really big into animism, by the way, so that hits it home for me.
Perfect.
Yeah,
You ready for the next one?
absolutely.
You're gonna love this. Passport to Magonia with the good creepy cover.
Ooh, that is the creep. I remember seeing that on Facebook recently, and that is one of the creepiest covers I have ever seen. However, I think it is perhaps the most accurate. It's just missing a
Mhm.
fairy, in my opinion. Oh,
Well,
and
I think that's what she is.
oh, I
Now
thought it was just
apparently
supposed to be a human woman.
apparently there this is a zoomed in version of this image. The
Oh,
alien in the full image is a hand puppet.
really?
Yeah.
Excellent.
So it's just layers upon layers and masks of all kinds of different sorts.
Ooh.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Passport to Magonia is a fairly old book in terms of Fordiana. It's not quite like John Keel, but it's fairly contemporary. The idea, and it's written by Jacques Vallée, the idea is that all of this phenomena is the same thing, wearing
Mhm.
different masks and portraying itself in different ways to everybody based on what they expect to see, what they anticipate, their cultural background, the physical location. It's the same thing,
Yep.
manifesting in a unique way.
Yes. And that's exactly what the non-human people told me when I was a paranormal investigator and whatnot. It all lines up exactly. And so when I would go into cases, I wasn't there to fix a human family's problem. I was there to do a holistic investigation and to try to make peace between both sides fairly for both.
Hmm.
So most of the time, I wouldn't even talk about anything paranormal with the family for the first several hours. I would get to know them just as people, look for red flags, green flags, all of that. And then I would excuse myself to go walk around the house and snoop and be nosy, especially to try to invite a non-human person to come and talk to me, like tell me what's going on. Most of the time, these non-human people, even the so-called parasites and the so-called demons, which I do not believe that they are either, would tell me that, well, emotionally speaking, I don't believe that they're either. There are Parasites, yes, specifically by the definition, absolutely, but not all emotionally tangled up and evil and all of that, like what most human people believe. But they would tell me that um, they were putting on one presentation for me, and then they had a whole other presentation for the human family or whomever, and then for anyone else who might see them, and that they don't really have a solid, firm body or shape in the way that human people
Hmm.
think of it. And they also explained that they love creativity, they love stories, all of them, even the so-called evil ones. And so they just see all of this as for themselves, like a non-emotional story. So when they were appearing to human people as one thing or another, it was both to get their own needs met for food so that they could manifest more fully into this realm should they like. It could be for pleasure. But then there was always this backdrop of they're doing it to provide humanity with certain opportunities and storylines and feedback, if
Hmm.
that makes sense. Mhm.
That's interesting. I'm gonna have to
It's
ponder that one a bit.
It's very, very different. And so this helped to shape my own belief that um, so-called angels, like the light, feathery angels that most human beings think of, they're always there to do the human bidding and whatnot. And then the so-called demons who oppose humankind, and then the fairies and the big feets and the the parasites, and then everything in between. I believe it's all the same, just wearing lots of different masks. And in my talking to angels, fairies, demons, everyone, even the forest guardians, they all have the same apparent inherent morality, which I found fascinating because I wasn't expecting that. So they
Hmm.
they all just wear different masks, even the so-called gods, especially religious gods. And I don't worship. I don't recommend anyone else does either, unless they want to. If they want to, then I don't see that as my business. I'm just saying that these are all just roles that non-human people are playing for lots of different benefits and opportunities and storylines. But like I always say, I could be crazy, so don't listen to me probably. I'm just a chick in pajamas talking in front of a Christmas tree. I believe some pretty wild things, so I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you mentioned that they all had a similar moral base or a similar unified morality. Could you expand on that? What is their morality? Is it something we can even understand?
Um, okay, so this is where it does get a little tricky. People who are lawyers, human people who are lawyers, may understand this type of thinking best because it's extremely literal and contractual. The
Okay.
average human person is a very emotional reasoner, emotional thinker, very
Hmm.
easy to manipulate. And they're often actually, I was told by these non human people, delusional, that most human people are delusional. And I actually agree with that because most human people do not understand, nor do they use language properly in terms of what is opinion and what is fact.
Hmm.
So human people all the time are stating facts as opinion and opinion as facts. Human beings also lie constantly to themselves and to other people. And it's just a mass delusional state most of the time for most human beings. So this is why, too, I'm extremely careful about who I allow into my life, who I take any type of advice from. And I always have to keep in mind that people don't think like me and they don't think like the non human company that I keep. So I
Hmm.
have to make allowances for human people and expect that they're going to misstate things, not necessarily because they're out to control me or get me or because they mean to. It is just because that is how the average human person thinks, reasons, and how they are taught by their own society. So, you know how it is said that fairy people they don't lie because they can't?
Right. Yes.
This is actually this is very true in my experience. So, when they communicate via telepathy and whatnot, I
Hmm.
have never ever had one lie to me as far as I know, and they've all insisted that they cannot lie. It is a biological inability, and it's actually an ability that is special to human people. Human people are the
Mm.
only ones who can verbally lie. So the
Hmm.
jinn, demons, the fairies, the angels, all of them, when it comes to direct mind to mind type of communication, you would think of like speech. They can't lie like that.
Oh, yeah, if you can communicate or telepathically, you couldn't lie.
Correct.
It would
Yes,
be it would take a lot of practice if you wanted to, but even like if something can read your mind, it's going to know immediately that you're lying.
exactly. Exactly. And so I forget who it was. There was someone who said that less physical non-human people possess perfect knowledge, but the inability to act physically here as we see it, as we understand it. I largely agree. Whereas human people are the very opposite. They have great physical ability comparatively and very little knowledge and wisdom.
We have
And I
imperfect
agree.
knowledge.
Correct. Yeah. So it's just a mirror. But when these two can come together, that's where, in my opinion, the real magic happens, and that's why I'm here. But at any rate, so human women wear makeup, right?
Hmm.
They do lots of hair treatments, and they wear things like corsets. And you gentlemen, you shape your beards. Sometimes you dye them. You might dye your hair. You might get hair implants and whatnot. I have nothing at all against that. But the thing is, all of that is a form of masquerade.
Hmm.
You're not showing your true physical raw form. And so human people often get really, really upset, and very hypocritically, in my opinion. And this does upset me greatly. They get very upset for these non-human people for changing their appearance and whatnot, but human people do the same all the freaking time. I don't understand what the big deal is. If you're going to go out to a first date, my friend, you're not going to go in your basketball shorts and unshowered and, not trimmed up nicely and stuff. It's all context dependent, right?
Right, right.
So that's their way of so-called lying. It's more like dressing up. And then the thing is, human people tend to just assume that what they see is either completely false or completely real. And that's another thing
Mm.
that they say that they have a problem with human people for, that there's no middle ground. There's no sitting back and just trying to be cold and logical about it and just watching what happens. So this is why they value calm human people. Um, so they change their appearance due to the context and whatever goal that they may have, or sometimes I'm told they'll just show up, and however someone else, a human person, would interpret them, that's how they allow themselves to be interpreted, because they either don't care, or it would amuse them, or it would actually further their desired agenda for human people to interpret them just however they would to fulfill a
They
storyline.
they
Does that
could
make
be malleable like that and see who reacts in a certain way
correct?
and
Yes,
choose, oh, okay, that person is okay. I'll talk
yes.
to them. That person freaked out and ran away, so we're not going to
That's
talk to them.
exactly
But,
it. Yeah,
this person I can talk to.
that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Which,
So,
if we are determining what they look like, that's also a reflection of our own character.
correct. That's absolutely right. And it's the same too, talking about their morality. Over a few dozen cases, I came to realize that it seems like these non-human people were telling me the truth, in that these so-called parasites and demons, they're only coming to and attaching to people, human people,
Hmm.
that, excuse me, have very low unhealthy vibrations. So they're attaching to people who are super combative, especially. So religion and politics are two big ones, which is why I don't promote them at all over here. I'm happy to talk about philosophy. No social agendas, no religious agenda, no political agendas here whatsoever. And I refuse to choose my guests based on those kinds of criteria, because to me, it's just bad juju. But
Hmm.
then also, that can change the whole vibration of a person and bring it down over time, even just through that type of exposure. I don't want that for myself, you know? But then
Hmm.
they also choose their victims based on the larger vibration physically that's being put out. So if this person lives in a dirty home, for
Hmm.
example, they have poor physical health, poor mental health, poor emotional health. They're surrounded by users and abusers, or they themselves allow themselves to be, constantly abused. They also, almost every single non-human person that I've met hates dogs. They absolutely hate dogs. Dogs are
Hmm.
yeah, dogs are seen as the filthy mirror of humanity's darkest aspects. And I do agree with
Oh.
that. Yeah, because we think about it, they have human people often have dogs in the house. What do dogs do? Dogs bite children. They poo on the carpet. They growl and they fight over food. They can turn on and often do attack their human companions just out of the blue. They carry tons and tons of diseases no matter how well you try to clean them up. They cause lots of accidents by escaping out of the house, running down the street. The human person runs after them. It's a massive adrenal event. So they're also draining human energy. They're just chaos, you know? So having dogs is also a significant risk factor, and animal hoarding in general, I've found.
Oh, hoarding of any sort, absolutely.
Of any sort, yeah. Of
Yeah.
any sort, absolutely.
I
And
have a
then
slightly different view on dogs, though, and
that's okay.
although it's slightly similar to yours too,
Oh,
or
huh.
actually more similar to the entities, that they're a reflection of their owners.
Ah, yeah. And I personally, I do hate most dogs. I agree with the non-human people. I've had awful experiences with dogs. However, there are some lovely exceptions, and I do believe that souls can come in any container, and that includes dogs. So I have met what I believe to be some ensouled dogs. So I don't want everyone just to think that I hate dogs just blindly. It's a little bit more complex than that.
It
But
usually is, so
yeah,
that's fair.
yeah. Cool. But yeah, I completely agree with you, and that's largely what they were saying as well. So I think it's perfectly fair. Um, but yeah, the when they build relationships with someone, it is extremely literal and contractual. So this is why they often avoid human people, because human people are largely unreliable. They don't keep their promises most of the time. They lie. They're unpredictable and fueled by emotion, most of them most of the time. Why
Hmm.
why in their opinion would any sane person want to work with that? And I agree with that. And so even for me, if someone starts being nasty, breaking their promises and whatnot, and they don't have like an emergency going on, I dump them. I refuse to tolerate it anymore. I just can't.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
Anyways, but what do you think about all of that?
Well, so I didn't mention this on the camera, but I am an outdoor educator on top of that's my day job.
Yes.
I actually see a lot of the way the parasitic entities and really any of the other entities who feed on humanity, it's a logical extension of nature itself.
Yeah,
They
I
go
agree.
to, like you said, people who are hoarding or live in poor conditions of their own making, people who are sickly, who have addictions. You see
Yeah,
the same thing with
abusive
predators
people
in the
too.
wild. When
Hmm.
they are chasing prey, they don't go for the healthy ones
Yeah.
because they run faster, they fight back, they're strong. You go for the ones that are weak, sickly, or old.
Hmm.
So it all makes perfect sense to me because to
Hmm.
them, they're getting the same nourishment out of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And if the less energy they have to expend on their own, that's more energy that they have just to exist. Because
Yes.
predators in the wild, they don't know when their next meal is coming. So they
Yeah.
conserve as much energy as they can.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And they told me too that they will not touch um any person who is in a good healthy state and doing good healthy things in the world, because it is one, it's not the vibration that feeds them, and two, they see it as morally wrong, which I found it was fascinating because when I started out, I was very young. I was very young and very innocent, and I didn't understand the whole concept of demons yet and whatnot
Hmm.
versus what I found out later. So I just thought that demons were looking for any opportunity anywhere, and that they do good thing, or they do, excuse me, awful things to good people. Not at all the case. I've never ever encountered a case where someone has been a truly good person by the non-human standards
Hmm.
and been haunted or attacked or had any trouble from any of these guys. It just does not happen.
It
Every
makes sense
time,
to me.
cool. So like every time a so-called parasite or demon has attached to someone, it has always been that this person has some type of hidden addiction and or they're
Hmm.
an abuser. They're abusing other people. That's always been what it is, coupled with lying. There's always been extreme lying.
Hmm.
And so after dozens of these cases that I had to retire because I didn't agree with the Catholic Church saying that the human people are always right and that they just need some guidance and that the non-human people are always wrong and need to be subjugated to human authority because of, their Catholic God and whatnot. So yeah, I don't know. A lot of people call me a traitor to humanity. I don't see it that way. I see it as giving the necessary feedback and opposite side of the coin so that maybe human people can make different choices and get different results, get different relationships, and develop maybe a morality that is perhaps actually closer to what you could call, God and whatnot, and true love for everyone, including non-human people and inanimate objects and animals and themselves and each other. So, but I don't know. I leave that all up to everyone to decide for themselves.
Well, best case scenario, let's say there's someone who really on the outside is a good person and they don't have a hidden addiction, they're not cruel to people, they don't have anything really in their closet, so to speak, that they're hiding. Maybe it's their ego. If they're being
Adolf,
tormented, it could be something as simple as that.
it is actually that is part of it because they consider that to be part of the invitation. Um,
Mm,
they do not like human people for the most part because even if they don't have a massive hidden manipulative agenda and whatnot, the human people,
hmm.
typically human people have not only a big ego, but they have arrogance and stupidity along with it, I'm told.
That's a dangerous combination for sure.
It is. It is. But I've witnessed it in my own life watching human
Oh yeah.
people. Yeah. And so that alone is technically enough to attract a parasite. And I'm told that even if it's not at the level that they can attach right then and there, that they wait right there in the pre-physical for that
Oh yeah.
person to get sick, to have an accident, or to have a serious oh goodness, I don't know, some massive chaotic event that just lowers that vibration a little bit more, weakens the aura a little bit more, and that way they can get in. But that's typically the beginning of it. These people tend to be predisposed via their own ego and arrogance to attack.
It's predation. They
Yeah.
Nothing attacks the first animal they see. Sometimes they follow the herd or they follow an individual for a while and they wait for the opportune moment.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they told me.
And it's not malicious.
Nope.
It's calculated for sure, but
Mhm.
everything's got to eat. The only reason we're biased is because they're feeding on us.
Thank you. Exactly. And during my first several cases, that's precisely what they had explained to me. They pulled me aside each of these cases, like the first six cases, and some of them even apologized that I was there. They just said things like, "Hey, you know what? We're sorry that you're being brought into this. This has nothing to do with you. It's nothing personal. These people are putting out free food, so we're here for it. And if we have to bump up the energy a little bit every now and then, that's what we do because these people invited us, and this is how."
Every once in a while, we just knock a book off the shelf. It's fine.
Yeah, literally. There was one case that I worked. The one person was absolutely just hysterical over every little paranormal thing that happened. And she just was a complete hot mess in general. But anything paranormal that happened just completely flew her off the handle. So
Mm,
I was sitting there in the living room with her and I was on the couch opposite of her. And so from the corner of my eye, I see the non-human person come in, and I had already done the talking, and so I was trying to formulate a plan since I had talked to both parties at this point. And the non-human person just goes, "Hey, you want to see something cool?" And
Yes,
just
yes, I do.
right. So there was a small little corded lamp. This lady was like in her 60s, and she was a piece of work. She was highly emotional, did not understand opinion from fact,
Mm.
was very controlling, and I wouldn't say that she was necessarily abusive on purpose. I think she meant well. I just think that very, very arrogant and very, very closed-minded, you know?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a
Okay.
generational thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't quite know how to say that. But yeah, you're right. So I usually say most of these non-human people seemed very masculine, seemed very male. So I usually call him he, usually. There are some exceptions. So comes in, you want to see something really cool? Yeah. And we're communicating just telepathically. So he just kind of like floats his way over to the lamp that was near the woman, swipes it off of the table clean, and she flips out. She absolutely flips out. And so this non-human person just like floated right over near her, and I could see him like feeding off of the energy that she was putting out because her aura exploded at that point with
Mm.
fear and whatnot. And so he just stood there and he sucked off of it until she started to calm down, you know? And so that was one of the most interesting experiences of my young life at that point. And calming her down involved taking her outside, getting her completely out of the house, and then trying to help her understand that these are the red flags I'm seeing. This is how you're making it much, much worse. And she wound up just kicking me out because she said that I had no empathy. Yeah, she said, so a lot of these cases ended in absolute disaster because they would a lot of the time either blow up at me because of
Mhm.
the stuff that I was saying, even though I was there to help them, and of course kick out myself and then the team that was there because I would
Mhm.
typically have 3 to 5 other people with me. Um, but nonetheless, um, as far as I know, she didn't change anything, and I guess she was haunted until the end of her days. I don't know, but she didn't want to make any changes, and dude was getting all the food he could enjoy.
Mhm.
So, I mean, what am I supposed to do? What is anyone supposed to do? She didn't want to change anything. So,
Yeah. People, if they don't want to listen, there's nothing you can do about it.
no. So that's the majority of the morality, I think. At least that's what's all coming to my mind to share with you right now. I
Mhm.
hope that I've given you a good amount of information, but if you have any more questions, I'd be happy to answer for you.
I think that'll do. It
Yeah.
actually is a good springboard for the next book,
Cool.
which is Hoodoo Cleansing and Protection Magic.
Oh, interesting. We're full of a lot of synchronicities tonight. You know that?
Yeah. And what's funny is a lot of what's talked about in this book goes right back to what you were saying.
Really?
One of the
I've
first
never
things
studied
they
voodoo.
recommend, one of the very first things that's recommended in there is when something is going on, when you think you might be hexed or cursed or something, clean your house,
Yeah.
clean
Oh,
your environment, clean your living space.
interesting.
Because they don't say that there's entities or parasites hiding in there, but it's heavily implied that clutter creates environments for this type of manifestation to happen.
Correct. That's absolutely correct from what I understand. And I have even found non-human people. Oh, I'm so excited right now. Excuse me. I have found non-human people hiding in laundry baskets and piles of clothes and
Mm.
whatnot in the little gaps between items and hiding behind uh objects that have been sitting somewhere for quite a while. So, oh yeah, absolutely.
I almost never physically see entities. Never.
Hmm.
I honestly can count maybe like three tops if I try really hard.
Gotcha.
I left for a week-long camping trip one time. I
Yeah.
came back, and this is my bedroom behind me here. I throw my camping gear on the bed, and nope, wrong side. Right back there in this upper corner, there was
Yeah.
something lurking up there in the shadows, hanging like in the corner. And I was like, nope, no, go. You can't be here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it took a little stern talking to, but it eventually left. But that is so jarring
Oh
to
yeah, for
walk
sure.
into some place that you feel is your sanctuary, some place that's safe, and oh, there's something right there.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but um, like I said, cleaning is the first part. The interesting thing about hoodoo cleaning and cleansing is that they incorporate a lot of the protection into the cleaning process itself.
That
And
is what I recommended too,
yeah,
interestingly enough. Yeah.
so it's not just like walking around with sage, it's
No.
adding specific oils to your cleaning
Yeah.
solution. It's using a
Yes.
special blend on your windows, on your doors,
Yes.
doors especially.
Oh yes.
Portals in general are a big
Yes.
thing because portals are not just physical things, they
Mm-hmm.
are symbolic. They're metaphysical representations, they're transitional periods.
Yeah.
So an entry, it could be like, let's say there's a door to my room right here. It just
Mm-hmm.
leads to another room for us. But that door could be an entrance to another entity or where they're staying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they love liminality as well. They're absolutely fascinated by liminality. So the way that they explain it to me is that they consider themselves to be highly liminal because they have much lower ego content and much lower emotional content. But they consider human people to be the very opposite, very, what is it? Static, I think the word is.
Hmm.
Like
Okay.
very, very fixed for the most part. And so they like to inhabit the liminal spaces because it gives them it's kind of like forks in the road where
Hmm.
they have access to multiple areas at once. And they really, really enjoy that. So vents, I've seen them in vents before, lots of
Okay.
times. Closets are really good because you've got all of the clothing in there from all around the year, and there's lots of information stored in the closet, as well as
Mm-hmm.
lots of energy. And then human people don't typically come in there. So it is a highly liminal place, just in a slightly different way. And then anything cluttered, and then anything like temporary holiday decor, they may like to hide in that as well. I just did a whole
Oh.
episode about Christmas trees.
Ah, yes.
Yes. Let me see. Doorways especially are really good.
What about under
Fireplaces.
beds if they're
Yes.
cluttered versus clean underneath?
So what I have seen and been told combined tell me that if it is a clean underbed space, that attracts a higher quality of
Mm.
non-human person. So say like a house brownie.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm. But if it's dirty, that's where the more parasitic ones like to hide. So
Oh.
yeah, I hope that makes a little bit more sense. So you've got liminal spaces, but then um you've got what I call extraliminal spaces. So say that the spaces between branches on your artificial or maybe even a real Christmas tree. Those
Okay.
are extraliminal spaces, or the space between the lowest branches of that tree and the floor. The spaces in the stockings that people hang up on the mantle, the spaces in the wreaths that people hang up, you know?
That was actually the thing that just popped into my mind that made me go like this. Is like wreaths
Uh,
are very good temporary
yes.
semi-liminal spaces.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So anything within those types of items, I call extra liminal space. They are
Extraliminal.
extra attractive. Yes. And then
Interesting.
when we have clutter as well, I consider that an extra liminal space too, but in the opposite direction. So there's kind
Right.
of like I regard it as a spectrum from negative attracting to positive attracting, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah.
And we have the base liminal spaces like the fireplace, hallways, vents, doorways, closets, under the bed. And then we can make them extraliminal by changing the vibration, changing the decoration, or keep them in that very, very neutral type of uh, vibration, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually that makes the hoodoo practice of cleansing doors and adding things to the doors and the door frames, under the floor mat, under the lintel, under the
Yes.
front step, all of
Mhm.
that makes a lot more sense because
Yes.
what you put there is what you're attracting in or what you're
Correct.
repelling.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yes. So, for
And
example, oh, please go ahead.
well, something else occurred to me too while you were talking about liminal spaces and how these entities are drawn to them. It also makes me think that that may be one of the reasons that things like crossroad dirt
Yes.
is so powerful.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Fireplace ash too is sacred to
Ooh,
non-human people.
interesting.
Hmm.
I'm
So,
getting all kinds of ideas.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, we can maybe collaborate on something later on.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so when I would teach human people who wanted to listen to what I was trying to explain to them, the ones who would follow the care plan that I was putting together for them, they would have phenomenal success. And it has nothing to do with religion or anything of that. It's all actually very formulaic and, in a way, scientific. And I think that as human people advance, they're going to come more to understand why light, sound, and therefore vibration are so very important and scientific. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so, for example, iron is really important over in Ireland. And
Hmm.
there are some people who swear that all fairies are deathly allergic to iron. That's not at all true.
No,
There are there are, from what I understand, very positive fairies who even have interbred with human people who are anemic.
the
And so
She have
iron,
blacksmiths.
huh?
The She
Mm.
in Ireland, they have blacksmiths. They're not
Oh yeah.
allergic to iron.
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. So it really just depends. So the negative fairies, in my understanding, negative comparative to towards human beings, are very, very repelled, deathly allergic to iron. But the ones who tend to have a gentle nature, they vibrate well with
Mm.
iron, tend to be anemic, and therefore they love iron. And it is said that the offspring of positive, high vibration fairy people and human people are highly anemic, and they needed to be fed and could only live on a diet of red meat and high fat dairy, for example. And that would
Okay.
be to combat that iron. And so I hope that tie in all makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I over here in the door I was referencing earlier, there's a horseshoe nailed above it. When I first moved
Awesome.
in, I had problems with things moving and disappearing and then reappearing in other places. So I was like,
Hmm.
okay, you can stay here. You're not allowed in the bedroom.
Interesting.
And it seems
Please.
to have worked.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't lock them out entirely. I just gave them an area where they were allowed to exist. Granted, now I have cats, so they don't show up as often anymore anyway, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
worked.
Interesting. And that's another thing too, cats. Cats were highly praised by almost all of the non-human people that I've met.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
Interesting.
Cats and horses.
Horses are a weird one unless you've been around them, but I
Mm,
understand.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I think I said all that I meant to say on that. The liminal spaces. Oh, armoires too. They love to be in
Oh,
armoires and wardrobes and whatnot.
That's that's an old mythology there.
It is, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
it exists for a reason.
Well, I mean, we had wardrobes before we had closets, so it makes
Mhm,
sense.
mhm.
It's just changed for the times.
Oh, I agree. And I have even heard reports of non-human people being underneath of couches. I've not really seen too much of that myself, but even my husband saw a house brownie underneath of one of his clients' couches unexpectedly here in the modern age.
Nice.
Yeah,
You don't see too many people or hear of too many people who have seen brownies.
right, right. But that's a whole other story for a whole other day. And my friend, I'm afraid that we are out of time.
Oh, and I have a brownie story too.
Oh, you do? Oh my gosh. Oh my
Next
gosh.
time.
Let's schedule for next month. I can't wait to hear all about it. But in the meantime, my friend, where can we find you online?
You can find everything about my show at esotericbookclub.org. If you want to listen on your favorite podcast app, I'm everywhere. Literally everywhere.
Literally everywhere.
Yep.
Excellent.
You can't miss
And
it. The logo is a book with a green ghost and a purple tentacle and an eyeball. It stands out. You can't miss
yeah,
it.
it really does. And my friends, since we are in the holiday season, he has made, I must say, a wonderful episode about the Christmas history of gingerbread.
Oh,
Please
yes.
go check that one out. You are in for a real sweet treat.
Pun intended, right?
Absolutely.
Now, to
All
go
right,
with that
everyone.
book, there's actually, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. That is the second book from this author. If you enjoyed that episode, you can go
Oh,
back 2 years, and there's another book that I covered called The Old Magic of Christmas from the same author.
whoa. I think I just found what I'm going to want to listen to later on tonight. Thank
There
you
you
for
go.
that.
Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes, for sure. All right, my dear. Until next time, I have been Tillie Treadwell. This is the bearded weirdo himself, Mr. Jason. And we will see you next month. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Stay weird.
Merry morning or magical midnight. Happy holiday.